Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Irrelevant RockCast with Mr. DuPont and
Mafia-Fedora.
I mentioned on the last episode that hopefully there'll be no more sad news by the time we record this episode. Sad news has happened. We are still going to discuss the things we promised we would, or at least the majority of them, but we are going to be talking about the deaths of two rock stars. Do you mind naming them, Matt?
We've lost officially Glenn Frey, who is from the Eagles, and we have also lost Dale Griffin from Mott the Hoople. Care to go a little bit into their backstories?
Well, let's just say that Glenn Frey was co-band leader of the Eagles with drummer and vocalist Don Henley. Co-vocalist, co-songwriter, co-guitarist, essentially important member of America's biggest selling rock band of all time. And people forget that.
Yeah, I think... Why do you think that might be? Because I have a theory, but I want to hear your opinion first.
They weren't even around for that long. The Eagles were only around for about 10 years. Between like 70 and 80, around that period. And let's just say this, their greatest hits album from 1975 is, I think, that or Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling compilation album of all time. That in itself. And also, Hotel California has sold like 30 million, around that.
Yeah.
Desperado, that sold a lot of copies as well. Essentially, the Eagles, in many ways, remind me of Fleetwood Mac. Like them and Fleetwood Mac were the two bands that had a bit of a country kind of jangly twang, as well as having that real classic hard rock feel, or classic rock feel, I should say. And also, in many ways, a supergroup, because the members in the Eagles, when they broke up, had really successful solo careers, and Fleetwood Mac, they were the same. They had famous members in the band who had successful solo careers, you know.
Yeah, that is just the case. Like, you see, my biggest theory is that is definitely, a valid point there, because, like, the Eagles, they weren't around for that long compared to other bands, but the mark that they left, as best as they could, there are some bands that just don't need to stay together that long and they already leave their mark on the world permanently. Like, if you take a look, say for instance, at Zeppelin, ran for about 12 years. The Beatles ran for no more than 1960 to 1970. They're probably the most obvious example, but they're pop culture giants.
And Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses were about 11 years, about that.
Yeah, exactly. But also, they did stuff just to get in the headlines too. Like, if you take a look at the Eagles, I don't know really what their reputation was back when they were together, but...
Well,
they just didn't really seem to have the same vibrant attitude, that probably got them out there on the same level. They're not, by any means, less important, but, I guess they just... Similar to AC/DC, you probably need to take a bit of a look deeper into rock music if you are not an immediate fan of that genre, just to know a bit more about them, their image, and what happens, because they don't really advertise themselves.
Oh, I agree. The Eagles are a band that have a famous back catalogue, but if you're just getting into classic rock, that they're a band that you really kind of have to buy their music to necessarily know the songs, apart from Hotel California, which is an absolute classic that majority of people who are into rock music in general know. That's the first song I ever heard. It was the first album I ever heard. The Eagles are my mum's favourite rock band. Because when she was a teenager, they were around and very popular. And what ended up breaking up the band was backstage argument or fight between, believe it or not, Glenn Frey, rest in peace, and former member Don Felder, who all that happened, and he got fired from the band later on because the Eagles actually reunited in 1994. But the Eagles had about 5 or 6 records in the 70s, but they didn't release another record until 2007. That's it. And they haven't made any other music. And they have been touring. The last time that the Eagles played in the UK was 2014. They played 4 sold-out shows at the O2 Arena in London. And one of my friends, Chris, he went to one of the gigs and he said it was brilliant. He paid a lot of money to be there, as you can imagine. It's the Eagles.
Yeah.
And he went with his dad, and he said that he found the crowd frustrating because after they played Hotel California, like half the audience left or something, and there was still about another 5 songs left to play. Which just shows you what kind of audience is that, you know?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. An audience that doesn't understand anything I mean, essentially, it's the same issue that I had for, I would have complained about this if I was only the age I am, back in a timeline where you had to physically buy CDs or albums with, the singles on there. I just get the full album because, obviously I understood the system.
Work of art.
Yeah. The album itself is a full-on work of art. And, yeah, I can understand. For some songs, good songs off really dodgy albums in general, that might be a key factor in it. And also I understand how the system works with the A side, the B side, and how it works, but come off it. If you want anything to do with the artist, you need to buy their full set.
Yeah, I'd say, especially with a band like the Eagles, who only have about 6, 7 albums.
Yeah.
Dire Straits as well.
Yeah.
Dire Straits are another band who never actually got back together when they broke up.
Yeah.
But Dire Straits had 6 albums, and they're considered one of the greatest rock bands of all time. But their back catalogue, they had, if you look at every album, there's at least 3 or 4 tunes on each record.
Yeah. Sultans of Swing actually is probably in the live set version that I've seen on their YouTube Vivo channel. That's probably one of the funkiest sounding, classic detective sort of style songs that you can make a theme tune for a film like that. And yeah,
that solo, so good.
I know, that solo's so good, and just Mark Knopfler's Geordie vocals, it's you could imagine, just seeing some sort of chase scene, Pink Panther style, or, cartoon style in the same sort of tradition as Bugs Bunny, running away from Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam. It's just that sort of thing. You'd even imagine, like a little cartoon variation of Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty going at it, and it works. It's just, get the full set, because it actually is, worth it in every shape and form. It is worth it.
Absolutely. Now, I'm a big Dire Straits fan. I haven't seen Mark Knopfler before. I've had opportunities, but I'm not really as much into his country music as I am into his classic rock Dire Straits, guitar-oriented music as such. But going back to the death of Glenn Frey, it's such a shame because, like I said, in 2014 they did the tour, The History of the Eagles, which is essentially a greatest hits set, which for a fan is an absolute dream. I never got the chance. Well, I had opportunities to see the Eagles, I just never did. Next tour I probably would have gone, just because they're a band that I wanted to tick because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the band will continue. It hasn't been revealed yet or anything, but he's a big piece. And if they replace him, those are big shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, like you said, you've got 3 or 4 lead singers the Eagles had. In the same way that Fleetwood Mac had, in the same way that in the 70s Kiss did with the 4 of them, and the Beatles.
Yeah.
And can you think of any others?
Immediately, well, not a full set, maybe. I don't know if John Deacon ever did, but I suppose you could say Queen, actually.
You could, but with Queen, you could say Def Leppard as well.
Oh, yeah, Def Leppard, you could definitely do that.
Yeah, but both of them, they do have real focal point frontmen.
Yeah,
as do Kiss.
Yeah, they have focal point frontmen, but Queen, they've got, I mean, I don't actually remember too much. I know Deacon obviously did great stuff as a songwriter, and I know that all, of them made great hits back then. and they were all just as important in that sense as you would expect them to be. They were pretty much, whatever you would want them to be as songwriters. But in terms of frontmen, yeah, that's a bit hard to place, actually. Because, you've got, with Queen in particular, you've got Freddie Mercury, Brian May, you've got...
Roger Taylor.
Yeah, Roger Taylor. I know John Deacon definitely did contribute as a songwriter. I'm not too sure about a singer, but if he did, probably not in that same sense.
Yeah, that's it. And vitally important member who doesn't want anything to do with the current Queen and hasn't since the Freddie Mercury tribute concert.
Yeah.
But with the Eagles, though, their music I find is very relaxing. It's country-driven radio rock music. Songs like Take It Easy, Heartache Tonight, obviously Hotel California, Life in the Fast Lane. My favourite song is Take It to the Limit. Yeah. I'm not sure if you know that song.
Of course I do.
Yeah, and then that's the lead vocal on that is by Randy Meisner, who is no longer in the band, but they were the kind of band where you kind of had to have a good voice to get a place in the band, regardless of your instrument, because very harmonised band. Yeah. And obviously, as I mentioned before, Glenn Frey also had a really successful solo career. I haven't actually personally heard any of his solo music, and the only solo artist that I've heard music from the Eagles, I've heard Don Henley's music, and I've heard Joe Walsh's music. Haven't heard the others, but maybe now the relevance. Maybe I should start listening to some of Glenn Frey's music.
Yeah. Of the two of us, you can claim to be the educated one, because I've only really heard Don Henley, and I don't think I've even heard enough of that to say I know enough about Henley's full stuff as a solo artist. But yeah, as you say, they were a very harmonised band. I think, it would be really difficult to see, whatever it was, that actually got them to break up. You wouldn't really expect any of them in that sense to have an ego drive ahead of the others. I don't know if that's true or not, but they're one of those bands you wouldn't expect egos to be the breaking point, because they all have to have, that. No,
it was just conflict between each other.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, in that sense, that they would need, to all be considered on each other's level in every way, including attitude, and there would be no room for ego in that sense. Yeah.
For sure. And another cool thing about the Eagles, actually, is Hotel California is their biggest hit, and it's sung by their drummer, which is very kind of Phil Collins-esque. And that song came out in 76, 77, and you don't get that anymore. These days, if you had a band with a hit song, which these days in rock music, as we know, is very rare, because of the labels, they wouldn't say, we don't want the drummer singing it from behind the kit. Don Henley does.
Yeah, exactly. It's just actually, what is this? Just very quickly, slightly off topic, but on the subject of frontmen, how important do you think it is that we actually need to have bands that, as you say, in that same harmonious sense, there aren't that many bands together that seem to have that same sort of harmony and chemistry, where they will, allow people that could fill that slot for whatever reason and might even be the best fit to do it. But bands in general, I see a lot of them, and they seem very reluctant to get out of their comfort zone. There are some rock stars that may be guitarists primarily, but they see themselves with great voices, and they'd be up for that, but, for whatever reason, whether or not they have the best voice for that particular song, they just don't get much support from other band members for that particular set to be filled. Go on.
No, sorry, man, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the front man wants to keep himself the voice of the band always.
For sure. As I mentioned before, some big bands have had members have solo projects, and earlier I mentioned Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
I saw Duff McKagan's Loaded. They're obviously bassist Duff McKagan's solo band, where he's the front man as well as the bass player. And Duff is a very average vocalist. And when I say very average vocalist, I mean he's a great backing vocalist. Yeah. He's perfect for the, like Sliver. He's perfect for the S and stuff like that. Yeah, but when it comes out to him being the front man of the band, his range just isn't enough. The guy can sing, but it's nothing that... It's not jaw-dropping the way you'd expect a front man to sound, Yeah. Especially in rock music, where, as we know, but I don't want to go too much into detail on this, but I think outside of like the rock world, rock singing is very underrated. It's a lot harder than people think it is to be able to sing over that level of volume in key and sing every night,
Yeah. And too many people associate that with screaming. They really need to look at the definition of what screaming bloody is.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's, for instance, Corey Taylor, Slipknot Always Scream. Oh, no, that guy can actually sing pretty well.
Yeah.
All you need to do is listen to Stone Sour, a few of Slipknot's ballads, and even a few Slipknot heavy songs. There's great melody. Listen to the chorus on Duality. That is great vocal singing, And before then, it was more blast beat hip hop kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know his name, but the lead singer of Escape the Fate, who sings on the song "This War Is Ours," like he sings, and he then does full on what you really expect screaming to actually be in that sense, and it's annoying. But that song, weirdly enough, it is heavy on the ears, regardless which way you hear it, but it helps you draw the line pretty easily between rock singing and metalcore screaming.
Yeah, that's it. And, this topic was obviously started by the death of Glenn Frey, and it's another one, man. It's another one to the horrible list that's, like we said, started with Scott. And it's still carrying on. And Glenn Frey from the Eagles, he wasn't the only person to die. Glenn was 67, which I'm not sure if I mentioned yet, but the other musician who died was Dale Griffin, as we said before, from Mott the Hoople, who was their drummer. Ian Hunter is the lead vocalist of those guys. They're a band that I believe were active or still are, and they're best known for the hit All the Young Dudes, which was written by David Bowie, who also obviously only passed away last week, which is so sad. But it's just, I mentioned on the last podcast, hopefully no more deaths, and it's happened. And, regardless of people at university here, they might not know the Eagles, but the Eagles, as I said before, are the biggest selling American rock band. And to get... I'm not going to lie, I didn't know who Dale Griffin was before I heard about his death, but I do know Mott the Hoople, I do know Ian Hunter.
Same here.
And it's still sad, it's still sad to know that a guy who's also 67 years old has passed, and it's just everyone from our world.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean, let's just face it. Death is a common thing at the moment, and rock stars are dying like flies. As they would probably reiterate it with Tyrion Lannister, Game of Thrones character, played by Peter Dinklage. That is basically me rephrasing his words of what he said once Joffrey called him a monster. But off topic.
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
I like the way you use elements of popular culture and history into the podcast.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Yeah. Oh, yeah, one other thing that I'm going to quickly mention is I'm actually currently studying podcasts.
Nice.
Which is interesting because I was like, me and my friend, we started recording one, just before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's been put on the Learning Network at the University of Winchester. So, if you guys don't hear this on SoundCloud immediately, go on the Winchester Learning Network if you're a student, and you can hear me and Matt. We can hear our podcast.
Yeah, indeed. And
we're now famous, sort of.
We are famous, at least within the community of this university, and me being a Wintonian, that makes me doubly famous.
Yeah, just to make this clear, we're not actually famous. And anyone who's listening to this, we we love you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you. We'd be like this regardless whether we were famous or not. We're thankful for each listener we have.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to wrap up this segment completely. I've spoken a lot about the Eagles. What do you think of the band? What was your history? What was your introduction?
I basically just got interested in the Eagles from actually when I saw Bruce Springsteen inducting. I think it was either just before or just at that point. In fact, it might have actually been about 3 months beforehand. I got into them shortly before I saw Bruce Springsteen giving the full introduction to Jackson Browne's induction into the Rock Hall. And he mentioned about how, I know the Eagles got in first, and let's face it, I think Don Henley will agree with me. These are the songs they wish they'd written. I just remember that, and that was probably
Sorry, who said that? Sorry?
Bruce Springsteen said that about, Jackson Browne's songs, which he felt he himself and Don Henley from the Eagles would actually have been jealous to have not written. But yeah, regardless, the Eagles wrote some great songs, and actually, yeah, they did fit into that very typical Jackson Browne-esque vibe of what you'd expect. And, yeah, great stuff. There was room in there for everything, because regardless where your background is, you could see the Eagles had, very laid back, but at the same time, very widespread appeal in the sense of there was a song that could just click with you and you'd be willing to go and check out their full back catalogue. And I think that with me, it was Hotel California that actually got me to go and listen to them a bit more. Then I saw a bit more of Don Henley's solo stuff on a mate's iPod, and I just saw a lot of things that I was really keen to just have whenever I was in a bit of a bad mood, because through a bit of a bad time in my life, I just wanted to hear more stuff to get me chilled rather than take out my rage against my pillow. So yeah, the Eagles were a great therapy session. They were really, really, really good just to get me in a relaxed state. And yeah, I ended up actually sleeping a lot easier with the sound of Hotel California and a few of their other tunes. It was just nice to have some stuff, and Don Henley's Boys of Summer is one of my favourite songs to play when looking back at some summer times.
Yeah, it's very much a summer tune.
Yeah. Not always for the right, joyous reasons, but in terms of pure nostalgia and looking back at your childhood, it's a great song.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, the reason why Don Henley went solo was because of their breakup.
Yeah.
Which, fortunately they were able to play together again. It's just a shame that the classic lineup can no longer play together because of the sad news. And, I woke. Actually, no, I didn't. This is how I found out about the death. It was Monday night, like late Monday night, and I just got in from the vault.
Yeah.
And went on my laptop, and boom, it came up immediately.
Yeah.
That not just Glenn Frey, but also Dale Griffin from Mott the Hoople had both passed at the same time. Obviously, the bigger headlines were clearly Glenn Frey's death, but I was like, no, he is, regardless of whether people have heard of him or not, the guy's a giant in rock music.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah, and it's the unsung heroes that actually seem to have the saddest deaths, because regardless how big the atmosphere is, it's like, I think the smaller the atmosphere, the more sad it is by extension, isn't it?
Yes, and I said it before and I'll say it again, regardless of whether people have or have never listened to the Eagles or what you think of them, they have sold more records than Aerosmith, Springsteen, Bon Jovi, Kiss,
Jackson Browne,
Bob Seger, ZZ Top,
Bob Dylan,
Roy Orbison, I think, Actually, I wouldn't know if you'd consider Roy Orbison a band, but I'd still, you'd still include.
He is, like Henley's Boys and Frey's lot, they are, without a doubt, great artists, all in their own right, as a band together.
And apart
Yeah, and apart. And also, Glenn Frey comes from a very musical city. He comes from Detroit, also known as Motown, Rock City. He's part of that great list of musicians that just come from Detroit, Michigan. And Seeger's from there, Kid Rock's from there. You name it.
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper's from there. Like, there are many artists from Detroit. If an artist comes out of Detroit, you can tell they're at least going to be big, even if they don't click with you. And odds are someone from that city will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that I am definitely going to do, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, is watch the History of the Eagles DVD.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I don't want to be one of those guys who watches the DVD or listens to the music because someone's dead. I do actually, believe it or not, this is true. I was listening to Take It to the Limit by the Eagles the day before he died. Now, I know he didn't sing that song, but it's still showing that I was listening to the Eagles, the day before the sad news happened. And that's because I've got the Eagles on my iPod. I've got the double disc Greatest Hits, which came out in 2003, and it's really good. Over Christmas, I just started borrowing a few of my mum's albums, and that's one of them. And yeah, I haven't actually yet had a proper listen to their last studio album, which was 2007's Long Road Out of Eden album. But I've heard it's really good and it's sold really well. My mum recommends it, so I might give that a listen. But yeah, like I said before, regardless of the Eagles' decision on whether they want to carry on or not, replacing that man will be hard, unless they just want to go down now to just a straight 4-piece, 3-piece, whatever. But
it would be a tough thing to continue. And if they had to do it, they'd want to do it in a way that actually just makes it so, look, we know exactly what we've got. We need to fill the harmonies up with someone of equal harmony. That is going to be a nigh impossible task to do. And one of the reasons that makes the Eagles so great is they are a harmonious lot. And regardless, about how they broke up and what severity was there in the consequence of everything, it's like these are guys that seem to be made to play together.
Yes, and obviously they've been playing together for... Obviously, I know there was the long breakup, but they have chemistry working together for about 45, 46 years, I presume the rest of the band are roughly late 60s, and hopefully they'll continue to play music for a number of years. But anyway, rest in peace, Glenn Frey, and rest in peace, Dale Griffin from Mott the Hoople. Okay, just moving on to our next part, we're going to talk about Download Festival and their Saturday night headliner Black Sabbath. Now, Black Sabbath haven't really been in the news of late, but the reason why we want to talk about them is because we've been meaning to talk about this for a few weeks now. And Matt loves Black Sabbath. One of the reasons I became his friend was because in script writing he was wearing a Sabbath shirt, and I thought, oh, that's cool, because we don't see many people at uni wearing a Sabbath shirt, so which is awesome. And
I actually got his reference when he mentioned Richie Sambora, which is a rare thing for a lot of people to get, because sadly they think of Bon Jovi as nothing more than John Bon Jovi himself.
Yeah, that's it. I've actually seen Richie solo. I've seen him a couple of times.
Yeah.
I saw him at Download, and I saw him supporting Aerosmith with Ori Anthony, who's former Alice Cooper guitarist and former Michael Jackson guitarist. He was going to be Michael Jackson's guitarist on the This Is It tour, which sadly didn't happen due to his passing. But talking about Sabbath, so Sabbath are a band I've seen 3 times since the 2012 reunion. Matt will be seeing Black Sabbath for the first time in June.
Possibly the only time.
And possibly the only time, because it is dubbed the farewell tour for Black Sabbath. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm happy to see that they've got at least 75% of the original lineup booked in. I am sad, though, that they don't have Bill Ward lined up. And in all honesty, I keep forgetting the reason why, but remind me, is it something to do with Sharon?
There's a few reasons. 2005, they reunited.
Yeah.
I know this is going back towards 2012, but they did have the four of them, and they did play at Download.
Yeah.
And then Heaven and Hell happened after that, because Ozzy went solo after that, and Heaven and Hell only had Geezer and Tony, and obviously Dio, and I don't know who was on drums, but it wasn't Bill Ward. I don't really think Bill Ward was interested, one or the other. And then by the time the reunion came about, Bill Ward originally claimed, I'm not going to be a part of this because Sharon and obviously management, they won't offer me, a signable contract, meaning not getting paid enough money.
Yeah.
And there was also another rumour that apparently he would only play on 3 songs, whilst another drummer plays the rest of their set, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then apparently rumours, a statement from Ozzy and the guys said, no, Bill, it wasn't to do with money. You weren't fit enough. You were too overweight to play in the band. And you're too overweight to go in the studio, and you were too overweight to go on tour. Then Bill Ward then came back with saying, for the road, I can admit I'm unfit. I could possibly get into shape. But for the studio, I'll be fine. But by that time, they'd already... Tony had cancer as well.
Yeah.
And for that reason, Ozzy, the guys made a decision that we need to move fast. And if Bill Ward's messing us around, we'll just no. Which... I don't know, it's a difficult one. It's a really hard one. So then they ended up getting Ozzy Osbourne's drummer. I apologise, I can't remember his name, but he's been playing live drums in the band since the 2012 reunion. It's not Bill Ward. I've seen Sabbath 3 times, and he's a really good drummer, and there is a drum solo, but when you look at the band, it doesn't look right. The band look good, but when you look at the kit with the older guys in front, it's... I don't know, we're talking about Judas Priest and Richie Faulkner. That's different because with them, KK Downing retired and said, love you guys, fair play. And they've replaced him with a guy who's basically like a miniature him almost.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying get a miniature Bill Ward, but with Bill Ward wants to be a part of things.
Yeah.
It's just... And as far as I'm aware, in 2016... the farewell tour, I don't think he's going to be a part of it either, which is a massive shame because in the 70s he was just a bigger part of that band as Geezer, Ozzy and Tony.
Yeah, and partially the reason why we would never get a Beatles reunion, even if they were, up for it, is because, well, let's face it, without John, there would have been no Beatles the same way there would have been without... I mean, they could have loosely got away with Ringo because, well, for some random reason, Ringo is always lumped aside. But if Paul or John moved out, it wouldn't be the same. I mean, you can't just get Julian or Sean to come in and fill their shoes, and believe me, they would have considered that if it was a possibility. It just wasn't a possibility, and to me, Sabbath really are the Beatles of heavy metal. Like, I want to see them together.
And they're all still alive, and they all still play music.
Yeah, they all still play music. They all want to be together, and
like we mentioned with Guns N' Roses, all 5 of their original lineup are still alive and playing music. Same with Black Sabbath. Same with Kiss.
Hashtag I hope we don't jinx this.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But
yeah, basically, sorry people, I have got a slight cough at the moment, but yeah. Yeah, it's just what it is. Like, if you see the Beatles of heavy metal, and you want to see the Beatles of heavy metal, the same way how you would the Beatles, you would never want to see them torn apart. The one thing that is actually changing this up a bit is the Beatles were so big in terms of ticket sales and album sales that you couldn't not have it that way. The fact that Sabbath, have only sold about 50 or so million worldwide.
I think 70.
Well, yeah, roughly that much. I think 70 or just a bit higher. But you get the point. They've not made it past the 100 million album sale mark. But if you take it in the context, the Beatles did more in just 10 years than any other band has done in their lifetime. Sabbath have done probably just as much musically, but commercially, the Beatles made it impossible for the band to get more than the original Fab Four. Yeah. Whereas Sabbath, were going around for as long as they can with constant lineup changes,
Ah.
and the only one
Some good ones, some bad ones.
and the only static member to actually remain completely black and Sabbath 100% was Tony.
The Iron Man Iommi. Yeah, and an absolute icon in the guitar players.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when they fired Ozzy and replaced him with Dio, that was a good move, but then there was tension between Tony and Dio.
Yeah.
And then obviously Dio ended up making the band Dio, and then they ended up getting... I may be wrong here, people. It was either Tony Martin or Ian Gillan. I know they've both been in the band, but I can't remember who was the original. But in the 80s, no one cared about Black Sabbath. It was... They became... Same with Deep Purple.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's not true. Deep Purple, when they originally got back together with Gillan, was successful, but then after that first album, essentially for the latter of the decade, Deep Purple was struggling as well, same way that Sabbath were. But Ozzy's solo career in the 80s was absolutely flying.
Yeah,
and
indeed,
it was. And for me, my favourite Black Sabbath album is actually the debut album from 1970.
Yeah.
This obviously starts with the rain and the thunder.
Yeah.
And it's got songs in it like NIB and The Wizard.
The title album song.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Yeah.
And
it's just like Sabbath, you could tell they started off as close as they could to traditional blues roots. And then they immediately transcended into their own industrial field. That is the sound of Birmingham in that period, and even to this day.
That's right, and that debut album, and especially the Paranoid record, which has 3 of the greatest rock songs of all time on, in the shape of War Pigs, Iron Man, and Paranoid, incredibly influential, and the fact that one good thing, even though I can admit, people who know me know that when Download announced their headliners, I wasn't that impressed because I've seen them all and they're all regulars. But though it is, regardless of whether you've seen it or not, an incredible lineup of headliners. And the reason being, you've got the band who started heavy metal, you have the biggest British heavy metal band of all time in Iron Maiden, and you've also got the best live metal band on the planet in Rammstein.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know there's no Metallica, but I'm sure they'll be around some other year. But yeah, with Sabbath at Download, for me, I probably will watch it. I know this sounds nuts, but you need to remember, I've seen them 3 times. Now, they're a good live band. I've always enjoyed it. I saw them Download 2012, the O2 in 2013, and British Summertime Hyde Park in 2014.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed I did enjoy those shows, but they were all very similar. And for that reason, when they headline Download, I'm going to see who's headlining the second stage, because if it's someone I don't really like that much or have seen before, but I'm not bothered, of course I'm going to see Sabbath. But if it's someone like, I was about to say ZZ Top, but we're seeing them in Birmingham. So, but if it was
understandable, I mean, Sabbath are from there and ZZ Top are performing there. So yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. But what I mean is, when Sabbath are playing, if they clash with someone like Journey or Poison, I'll go and see Journey or Poison, because I've never seen either of them, and they're not in the UK much. I'm trying to think. There's a few other like second stage headliner-sized bands I haven't seen yet, but yeah, it's it makes you wonder really. This is going to be Sabbath's, well, they claim, their last ever Download, and will there be a UK tour after?
I don't know, and honestly, it would be nice for them to say goodbye to all their fans across the globe. Their final farewell tour, their UK tour, probably would be a very good, specific way of doing that all around, and probably knowing Ozzy, you could actually convince him to do it on the pub circuit if you were lucky enough to just get, word to him to say he'll do it before Sharon says she wants more money. Yeah, we've had a conversation about this, but apparently Sharon, knows how to make a bit more money for Ozzy than it would be if he was making his own decisions. And, yeah, I'd be up for it. I'd be up for all of it. But At the same time, I think if they really want to do a final farewell tour, there's only so many times they can actually do that before it just gets tedious. It'll probably get as tedious now for
Also,
them just to
they're too
keep
old.
doing. Yeah, they are too old to keep doing these sort of things, and I'm not saying just listen to us because we're experts, we know what to do, but if I was in the same state as quite a lot of people are at that age which still don't want to retire, people that just say reluctantly, I'm going to keep on going.
Oh, totally. They're not retiring Black. No, they're retiring Black Sabbath, but they're not retiring as musicians.
Yeah.
Because Ozzy Osbourne is going to go back to his solo career, which I'm very excited about because I've never seen Ozzy Osbourne solo.
Yeah,
which
same
means
here.
me, huge heavy metal fan. I've never heard live Crazy Train, Bark at the Moon, Mama I'm Coming Home, Mr. Crowley, Shot in the Dark.
I'm just a rock and roll rebel. I love that one, even though it's not actually a very well known Ozzy song.
It's from Bark at the Moon, isn't it?
Yeah, Bark at the Moon, and
I love the video.
I love the album art cover.
Yeah.
Ozzy went from full on, Prince of Darkness to a full on werewolf.
I'll tell you what. Have you ever heard the Ultimate Sin album from 1986? It's effectively Ozzy's hair metal album, where he had blonde hair and wore loads of eye makeup. And in the video for Shot in the Dark, it's in LA and the girls are going to the gig.
I've seen Close My Eyes Forever with him and Lita Ford. Like Lita, I could imagine he would probably do that sort of thing just because, well, you could say anything, that he'll probably just end up doing, and odds are Ozzy will just listen to you, because obviously he has will of his own, but he's not exactly the hardest person in the world to convince to do certain stuff.
I'll tell you what, one thing you got to give Ozzy credit for is he's a workaholic.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with him the other day, and they said, Ozzy, what's the plan for the future? Album tour, album tour, album tour.
Yeah.
And that's what he'll always do. And even when Sabbath's gone, he'll still have Ozzy Osbourne solo music with Gus G, and I can't actually remember because Ozzy's. My favourite Ozzy lineup he's had loads. I'm not saying it's his best music, but when he had Zakk Wylde and Robert Trujillo and Mike Bordin from Faith No More, that was a good lineup of musicians.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, I'll tell you what he could actually end up doing. He could become kind of like a motivational speaker for Aston Villa. Imagine that. I mean, he grew up like literally 500 yards away from Villa Park.
True. I don't think Ozzy's a big football fan, though.
He is.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, Ozzy is a football fan. He supports Aston Villa. And I found this out in Match magazine a few years back. He is actually meant to be quite a big Villa fan. And that wouldn't surprise me. He's raised in, literally not that far away from the stadium. And, Ozzy, working class background. Aston Villa are meant to be the working class glory firm that actually set up itself as being the dominant power football-wise in Birmingham. Because I don't know what the rivalry is based in, but my guess is probably Aston, working class sort of area. Birmingham City as a whole probably, seems to be the bigger image for the bigger up-and-comers of the city. Oh, totally. So it might just be a class system, because that's generally what rivalries here in England are based about.
For sure. But Villa are actually, I'm not going to go too much into football, but Villa are struggling at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
Really struggling. So hopefully they can do their best to stay up to keep Mr. Osbourne happy. Yeah. But you always saying about Birmingham, I mean, Judas Priest are from Birmingham, Slade are from Birmingham.
Yeah, Birmingham is basically, like, in terms of industrialisation and then also just like, the heavy metal specific image, it is almost kind of like Detroit in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know where ELO are from?
No. I would have said somewhere in the UK, but I wouldn't know whereabouts.
Yeah, neither do I.
All I know is that heavy metal is synonymous with the Midlands, and nowhere is it more synonymous than the Midlands' own capital.
Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Birmingham definitely the home place of heavy metal, like in what popular world culture, music in general. Yeah, even the Americans who are like, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot in the 80s and stuff like that. Like even Birmingham, because Birmingham in music history, Birmingham, England will have its own chapter.
Yeah.
And like Blackie Lawless from Wasp said in the VH1 Heavy the Story of Metal story, he said LA 82, 83 will have its own chapter.
Yeah.
Because a lot of British heavy metal... No, this is what... British music in the 80s, rock music, was popular, like Iron Maiden. But a lot of the old guards, like I said, the Sabbath, the Purple, struggled, and it was mostly American bands who took all the record sales in terms of heavy music.
Yeah.
The only... when you think about 80s metal from Britain in the... so when you think about heavy metal, British heavy metal in the 80s, you think of Iron Maiden's the clear one.
Yeah.
Motorhead sort of, because I said a few weeks ago about the divide of the original lineup happened, and they lost a few fans around that time, but they were still constantly releasing music and touring as Motorhead do. Priest actually got a bigger following in the US in the 80s. And actually Def Leppard, but Def Leppard don't like being called a heavy metal band. Joe Elliott has stated that many times. He said, we can appeal to Duran Duran just as much as AC/DC and Queen and Iron Maiden.
Yeah. And it is basically just what it is. Like, Motorhead, Def Leppard, all that sort of stuff, they were reluctant to call themselves metal, but Lemmy was from Stoke.
He was.
So it's hard to not see, them as metal, especially when you see the face of Motorhead put in the very place where heavy metal is synonymous.
That's right. Another British band I forgot to mention earlier who are important for heavy music from Britain were Whitesnake in the 80s, who I discussed a few times lately because of the Purple Album thing. But going back to Black Sabbath, their Farewell Donington show, if it does turn out to officially be Farewell, which I think it will be sad. Because they are so iconic. And it's fitting for them to be the Saturday night headliner, for sure. Yeah. Last year, the Saturday night headliner was Muse, and they were absolutely awesome. And Sabbath, I'm sure, will kill it this year. Absolutely.
Indeed, yeah.
What are your expectations of them performance-wise with Ozzy and Tony and what you've seen on the internet?
I'm hoping that they can at least just keep up what I have seen, which is mainly stuff from, like the latest it's really been, where I've actually paid any serious attention to it has been late 90s, give or take. But I'm hoping if they can at least bring it to that level, then yeah.
For sure. And the rest of Download Up, they haven't actually made any announcements since we recorded the first episode, but who are the bands you're most looking forward to at the moment? Just remind us.
Let's see. Hailstorm, Skillet, and let's see, who else is there? Maiden, Rammstein, and I'm trying to figure out, just beyond the general spectrum of, headliners, but...
Maiden, Skindred.
I've already said that, Skindred, will be keen to see Benji's boys again, and... I just want to see quite a lot of them, actually. I'm using this as more an experiment, more than anything, just to see who's there that will interest me. There may be just some split of the turn band that I will see on the night, advertised with something that I might recognise or something that I might think, that could click, and then it may just click and I'll be there for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, there hasn't been no official announcement, but as far as I'm aware, there's no Sonosphere. It's happening it usually happens every July, and it's only happened once out of the previous 4 years, which shows you that Download and the rise of Bloodstock, and there's just not enough bands to have 2 festivals of that size, really. I don't know if you've heard of Ramblin' Man Fair. It's become like the new classic rock festival that the Scorpions headlined last year.
No, I haven't heard of it, no.
No, it's in Maidstone, Kent. And this year, coming up, the headliners are Blackstone Cherry and Whitesnake. You've also got Europe and Airborne playing, but recently confirmed, Black Star Riders are doing a 40th anniversary tour of Thin Lizzy's Jailbreak album. So they're touring, I think, under the Thin Lizzy name, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm still very unlikely I'm going to be attending. Bloodstock, on the other hand, on the Bloodstock lineup, the headliners are, on the Friday you've got Twisted Sister, who we'll talk about very shortly. You've also got Slayer headlining the Sunday night with Anthrax just below. And the Saturday night headliner is Mastodon, who have never headlined the festival. And who else you got playing there? You got Venom, who are obviously a legendary British band from the early 80s.
Yeah.
So my mind's gone blank at the moment. Over the next few weeks, when I've actually got the Bloodstock poster in front of me, I'll remember.
Yeah, actually, reminding me, were Saxon ever said to be at Download?
Saxon are at Download,
yeah,
yes.
because they are a band I definitely want to see.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I just want to be able to sing Crusader, and obviously, yeah, not endorsing that. It's just a fun song to sing if you're a metaler, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's just great. I would love to just be able to go there and see those bands, but yeah, it is basically just going to be a pick and mix session for me. That's all I really see festivals to be anyway, and Download is going to be the first festival I've ever really gone to after about 5 years of desperation to get there.
Nice one. Well, 2016, boom, make it happen. I think Twisted Sister is something we've got to talk about because they snubbed Download to headline Bloodstock to make it be their farewell UK show. Dee Snider, although a controversial character, is very honest and you can trust him. He's the kind of guy who, when he says something, he means it, and if he makes a promise to the fans, it will happen. When Twisted Sister retired the makeup in about 06, 07, I think it was, they retired the makeup. They haven't worn the makeup since.
Yeah, roughly. So was that actually a promise they made to the fans? They were just going to stop wearing the makeup?
Yeah, that was it. They were just going to retire the makeup. I remember Stay Hungry got re-released as now called Still Hungry. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with that, but Twisted Sister have continued touring without the makeup, and it's not bothering the fans because they are still one of the best live bands in the world from that era.
Yeah, and in all honesty,
exhilarating.
Their version of Come On, Feel the Noise is...
No, that's not by them, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know, their version of it.
Oh, no, it's not. That song was done by Quiet Riot.
Oh, fair play.
That's all right.
Yeah, I sometimes get... Yeah, it's very easy to mix up those two, actually.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah.
Just to make this clear on the podcast, the good thing is where you've got two guys speaking who do know their music, that if one of us makes a mistake with something we say, because we don't have internet or... You know, we have a quick set structure, but we don't necessarily have notes. All of this stuff is just from memory.
Yeah.
And if one of us does make a slight mistake on, you know, a year or a record or anything like that, luckily we do have the other person to correct them if they think they've made that mistake.
Yeah.
Twisted Sisters, the only cover that Twisted Sister did, which was slightly successful, was they did a cover of the song Leader of the Pack, which turned out to be a bit of a disaster for them career-wise.
Yeah, remind me, who sang that originally?
I don't know.
Fair play. You see, we can even admit this if we don't both know it. But
exactly. But Twisted Sister are best known for the songs I Want to Rock, We're Not Gonna Take It, what's it? You Can't Stop Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
Such
a true anthem.
The Price.
Yeah.
And Under the Blade.
Yeah. We're Not Gonna Take It is my favourite of all their set.
Oh, exactly. And I'm lucky enough to say this. I saw Twisted Sister at Download 2014. And for me, I think they were the best band of the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And they were absolute phenomenal.
Yeah.
They still sound incredible.
Yeah.
And Dee Snider's voice is still brilliant. It's like he hasn't aged and he still looks good.
Yeah.
And... it was like, my God, it's 1984.
Yeah, so
it really is.
So many ways, him vocally is like Michael Caine in terms of, you don't necessarily think they get better with age, but only because they're so good to start off, you don't really see much room for improvement. So yeah.
That's absolutely right. Timeless, I think, is the word.
Yeah.
You know, same with Alice Cooper. It doesn't matter what decade it is, if they still sound great, look great, and are performing what the fans want, to that element of there is a nostalgia factor to it, but one thing that's really cool about Twisted Sister is the fact that they broke up in about 89 and they got back together in 04. And during that time, obviously, but since they've got back together, they haven't made any new music. And they've stood by. They said, we don't want to make a new album because the fans don't want to hear the new songs. And they also said, we don't really want new songs because they won't be as good as the old song. Twisted Sister have made that clear. Yeah. They said they had a moment in time. Okay, they wrote a Christmas album, actually, since they've reunited. Yeah. Which is fitting. It's called A Twisted Christmas. I haven't actually heard it, but I've heard maybe I should next Christmas for a holiday treat.
Yeah, it would make a nice change from just watching Die Hard again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Alan Rickman. But yeah, with Twisted Sister, I think Andy Copping offered them a slot that they didn't feel was fitting or potentially money, because the last two occasions that they've played at Download, they've been sub-headlining the second stage. So second stage, second from top is another way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I think they've probably been offered the same slot this time because they obviously haven't got any bigger since then. There's no new music or anything.
Yeah.
And they probably thought, this is our farewell UK show, mate. Yeah. We deserve a second stage headline or second or third top on the main stage. And I guess he just wasn't willing to offer that due to the demand in bands that we've already seen on the bill.
Yeah.
And they just said, screw you guys, we're going to a festival where they actually care about us. We're doing Bloodstock, we're going to headline, and we're going to have the time of our lives with our diehard fans who will be there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, I'm sorry I can't go to Bloodstock this means.
Nah, it's all right. I don't know what I'm doing at the moment, but I would love to get a day ticket just because their performance at Download in 2014 was absolute phenomenal.
Yeah.
And when We're Not Gonna Take It was played, when they made the crowd sing that chorus on their own, with Dee Snider just looking at the audience, thinking, I am your god for this next hour or so. Yeah, the hairs on my arms went up because I was just like, wow, this band really are. He is one of the great frontmen of the 80s. He really is, and exhilarating, and that's what I think of that band. I think in many ways they do remind me of the American Slade. There is a Noddy Holder-esque to Dee Snider.
Yeah, and Noddy Holder. Yeah, it's amazing. These guys, you can actually put them in really, really random settings. Like Slade, they do fit into that top of the pops kind of category, and hey, Noddy Holder even did host a while back a Christmas list of his all-time favourite Christmas songs, but you could put them anywhere, and you might as well just let them get away with it, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure. I think Twisted Sister are for sure a nostalgia band, but one that will be sad to lose, and there's a reason why they are breaking up. They're one of those bands who stand by what they say. As I mentioned the makeup before, as I mentioned new music before. Another thing, they promised, and I'm very lucky, I got to see the original lineup when I saw them in 2014, or the original classic lineup of the five of them. I'll try and name them. You've got Dee Snider, JJ French, AJ Perez is the drummer who passed away last year, which is the reason they're breaking up. They've got Mike Portnoy on drums now. The other members, you've got Eddie, OJ, I can't totally think of his name, but he was actually in the Hearing Aid We Are Stars song. He did the guitar solo in it.
Yeah, I saw.
And you also had Mark the Animal Mendoza, the bass player.
Yeah, Hearing Aid is officially the thing that is the best super collaborative movement for any cause, just for the sheer number of legendary voices that you'll ever hear in one setting.
Oh, totally.
Since they first decided it was a great concept.
Yes. However, for me, two legendary metal singers missing. I don't know why Dee Snider didn't sing on that song. considering his band played on it.
Yeah.
I think his vocals would have been brilliant on that song, and Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden would have been brilliant on that because of obviously you got Dio and people like Jeff Tate from Queensryche, who's a brilliant singer.
Right. Yeah, you've got the classic, heavy metal characters, and then you've got the operatic, falsetto, which is Bruce.
For sure. But going back to Twisted Sister though, Mike Portnoy is going to be the drummer for the tour. They are breaking up because of the death of their drummer. I can't remember the exact reason how he died. I'm not sure. It may have even been cancer. It's sad to know that a brilliant drummer has died and that a band are calling it a day, but at least they're giving us like a year and a half's worth of touring with a different drummer. And with Twisted Sister, it generally will be farewell. Since they've been back together, Twisted Sister only play 15 gigs a year.
Yeah.
About that, that's all they do. And when I say 15 gigs a year, I'm not talking a European tour. I'm talking in general, US and...
Yeah, I get that perfectly. Like, they take very specific sets, like select locations, and then they just decide, gig here, gig there, and stop. Yeah.
For sure. And their music's influential. It's even been used in SpongeBob SquarePants.
I'm
a goofy goober rock.
Yeah. I'm a goofy goober rock.
Yeah. That's it. And I think We're Not Gonna Take It was used for like an American election campaign at one point. I think it was used for like Ronald Reagan or someone.
Like Ronald Reagan. Oh, God. Do you know what? They actually used Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA at one point for that song.
Oh, yeah, purpose. But Bruce didn't want him to use it.
Well, no, it's not even that. They did actually, because there is a history in the States of them just taking random songs without even looking at the context. They just let, the titles speak for the cause, and, like, the Foo-Fighters, like, My Hero ended up being, it's a song about the common man, but, I think... The Republican Party used that. They used Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA because they obviously thought it was meant to be,
and like a national anthem.
Yeah, they actually just painted that as the unofficial national anthem of the United States of America. Yeah, you see, these are people that are so star and stripe spangled and struck with all that wonder about the American dream, that they fail to realise that Bruce's music is all about American reality. But, moving on.
That's very true. We haven't actually properly gone into Springsteen on this podcast yet, but we will do in due time. We know it's not exactly the hard rock and heavy metal world, but he is an absolute icon, as we've mentioned before, but... Maybe in the future we'll talk about him.
Yeah, and I just want to say this is called the Irrelevant RockCast, so we do kind of take a very Motorhead sort of influential outlook. We want to talk about everything we see as relevant to the rock spectrum because, it's called the Irrelevant RockCast, all a bunch of great genres of music and subgenres of the same genre, which, we just feel the need to actually talk about at some point.
Exactly, and we love classic rock, and Springsteen, the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, they are classic rock bands.
Aye.
And, and thankfully they're still around and touring. Hopefully a long time to come. Unlike Twisted Sister, who we're talking about at the moment, and at Bloodstock, they're going to... For me, I think they're going to own the weekend. I think they're going to be band of the weekend, and it's not just because it's their last show. It's because of all the bands that I've seen who are playing Bloodstock, they're the best.
Yeah.
And I would, if Twisted Sister did a UK tour, I would love to go to the London show. Or I don't think Twisted Sister would play South. The last time they actually played in the South was they supported Alice Cooper in Bournemouth about 10 years ago.
So actually, they were in former Hampshire territory.
Oh, yeah, true. I was just thinking of local.
I know. But if you think about it proper local, Southampton is the current thing on the very right-hand corner of the Solent, at the very bottom of Hants. It used to be Bournemouth. That used to be our seaside town. Then Dorset stole it from us. You will never take anything from us again. You took away our seaside town, but you cannot take away our Hampshire pride. I'm a proud Hampshire man, just so you know.
He is. He's born and bred in Winchester. And I'll tell you what, actually, when I went to the BIC in 2012, which is the Bournemouth International Centre, to see Alice Cooper, one of the support bands was Duff McKagan's Loaded.
Yeah.
And Duff actually said, you guys have a beautiful, beautiful city, even though he criticised the audience for not showing more enthusiasm during his set.
Yeah.
But you could either say that's because Duff McKagan's Loaded music is, in my opinion, fairly average. I do love Duff, he's a great guy, but great, awesome bass player, cool guy, in a great couple of brilliant bands, but yeah, for me, Loaded were pretty average. But he did say, you guys live in a beautiful, beautiful city. Now, I don't live in Bournemouth, but I still think that was very cool.
Yeah.
Now, as for Twisted Sister set at Bloodstock on the Friday night, possible day ticket, and I only have one Twisted Sister album. It's, Big Hits and Nasty Cuts, the greatest hits. It's good to drive to.
Yeah.
And it's got absolute raging songs on. But, they were, believe it or not, Twisted Sister actually in 1983 played at Reading Festival and got bottled. Because back in the 80s, that kind of behaviour was more
common.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad either way it happens, but it's just like, oh, for goodness sake. Show a little bit of respect. I mean, if the band, are deliberately dicking about, which Twisted Sister are not known for doing, because they're not that type of band,
No.
Just only keep the bottles in reserve for people that actually deserve it, like when Luis Figo signed for Real Madrid.
Exactly, and when Sol Campbell signed for Arsenal from Spurs, who were the enemy. But with my only criticism of Twisted Sister is some of the guys in the band are a bit too outspoken. Yeah. They're very honest, and half the time they're right. But I've heard some things about them being rude to some fans, and like Dee Snider's very outspoken. Like he said, "Why does anyone care about Doug Aldridge leaving Whitesnake when he didn't play on any classic records?" And that hit up a fuss with a few journalists and Doug Aldridge himself. And also there was that thing with Paul Stanley, which, in fairness, Dee Snider and Eddie Trunk actually started it.
Yeah.
I'll actually go into detail here because we actually spoke about Paul Stanley on the last podcast, didn't we?
Yeah.
Eddie Trunk, who's one of the faces and voices of hard rock and heavy metal journalism in the US, who has the show That Metal Show on VH1 Classic.
Yeah. Great
show. If no one's seen it, I recommend watching it.
Yeah.
It all started because Eddie Trunk and Dee Snider were criticising the fact that Ace and Peter's makeup is worn by Tommy and Eric, and he said, Dee Snider basically said, "Oh, Tommy Fayer's singing Shock Me dressed as Ace is disgraceful, awful." And then about 2 weeks later, Chris Jericho, the wrestler, lead singer of Fozzy, was interviewing Paul Stanley for his own podcast. And whilst on that, Chris Jericho actually mentioned what Dee Snider had said, and then Paul Stanley said back, well, he goes, "That guy is and always will be a wannabe, and his band are a bunch of buffoons." Which, in fairness to say, Twisted Sister are not as good or not as popular as Kiss. In rock history, we know that. But for him to call Dee Snider a wannabe, considering he has two of the biggest rock songs of all time, and a band who people still pay good money to go out and see, as well as being a phenomenal live band as well, is really rude. And he's not a wannabe, and his band are not a bunch of buffoons. They're the opposite. More than anything, Kiss are the band who are the hypocrites.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this much. Ever since I got to know you properly, I have found out a lot more about Kiss and just their general history of, how they've always been perceived and how they do have a tendency to let their fans down by saying certain things. Like, Kiss, to me, they really do, failed to do one key thing, and that is actually just live to their word. This is one
Stick
thing.
to your guns.
Yeah, stick to your guns. You need to stick to your guns the way how only Twisted Sister and select other rock bands are that consistent in doing.
Dee Snider on stage actually criticised Judas Priest.
For the same reason as what we discussed earlier on in the first podcast, which was...
Farewell.
Yeah, Farewell.
And they came back. Yeah. And Scorpions, they criticised as well on stage.
I mean, at the end of the day, that doesn't seem like the world's biggest issue, but obviously Dee, is so...
Dee's proud of the fact that we know that they won't come back. He was on stage and he was like doing... He's almost like a comedian on stage. Dee Snider is not scared to say what he wants.
Yeah.
And he was running around stage and he was like... He goes, we're breaking up and this is for sure. He's like... Fuck you, Scorpions. Fuck you, Judas Priest. Because you lied to your fans. You were meant to break up. You didn't. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, in all honesty, if we can still get consistent good stuff out of bands, we wouldn't want them to break up. We'd want them to come back and give us what they can give. Obviously, Dee, is a man that lives by his principles. One thing that I will always say, there is always an asterisk with every promise that people make inadvertently or otherwise. There has to be a reason why bands would choose to come back. Mainly because when they do make these rash decisions, they may even be feeling, borderline... They would have been put in a rock and a hard place, essentially, and then they could finally just have a helicopter... come down with a little rescue man getting them out of a tight squeeze. But, I've always said this. Promises, were not made to be broken. They were made to be held up. But you could promise something that you're not in the right mind about, like when you actually do that. Richie Faulkner gave the band new life, as we said, and I am glad that Priest ended up breaking that promise because it was the best pre-birthday present I ever had.
For sure.
And I am serious about this. I care more about the principles of a band artistically than I do about them face to face, making a statement which they may later regret. Dee, I am thankful, if you are hearing this, that you are a guy that lives by what he says on and off the record. Because clearly, you are just like this on and off stage. What I really would say, though, is that, if it can be broken for good reasons, promises, you can accept it if they get broken, because they are things you need to never make lightly. And if you do make them lightly and see you can break them without too much harm being done, go ahead, break it. I wouldn't care.
Well, following on from what Paul Stanley said, it's really harsh and immature comments towards Dee Snider and his band Twisted Sister.
Yeah,
he then wrote him a letter. Dee Snider wrote a letter to Paul Stanley saying... roughly saying, calling me and my band a wannabe bunch of buffoons. He said, me and you, band versus band on stage. He said, I can't remember exactly what he said. He said something like, I'll break you. I don't think it was I'll break you. It was something among those lines. It was, it was basically saying my band would blow your band off stage live at the moment, which they would.
Yeah, and I'm not denying that. Yeah. Kiss in their peak may well be a different story.
Of course they were. Kiss in their peak would blow any band off stage. Yeah. But at the moment, with Paul Stanley's vocal troubles and with Dee Snider having a lot more energy, and Dee Snider's lucky that he doesn't have to wear those boots, because Paul Stanley was always comfortable in those boots, but at Download, he looked like he was going to fall over.
Yeah, and actually... I'll say this much. Paul Stanley, I've looked at some recent live footage. He sounds probably about as bad as I'm giving myself a hard time about tonight, because I do have a slight cough. Sorry if it bothers you a bit, but that's just life. I had a bit of a rough sleep.
Yeah, I think Dee Snider, hopefully his voice will never go to waste, but I'm sure that where Twisted Sister will only be touring for another year, his voice will be fine.
Yeah.
And... hopefully it won't be the end of him making music, Same with the other guys. Same with Mark Mendoza and JJ French. JJ French actually gave a brilliant speech at Download 2014. He gave about a 5-minute speech on how, you know, he listed all the classic bands saying about how they're still touring, they're still together. And he said, if you've got people out there in your life who criticise rock and heavy metal, just remember, the biggest music festivals in the world are hard rock and heavy metal festivals. And I want you guys to give yourself a round of applause for being here with Twisted Sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being there, it was like, yeah, the guy's speaking the truth.
Yeah. And we're not going to take it. Yeah. And remind me, it's that song that says rock and roll, you can't kill rock and roll.
You can't stop
rock
and roll.
Yeah, that's it.
You can't stop rock and roll.
Exactly. Yeah, that speaks more true, even in times where rock isn't at its peak it used to be at. Because it is still every bit as influential, even, at an all-time low in terms of popularity. It's got more of a legacy, more of a back catalogue. It is, in that iconic sense. In terms of a genre point blank, it actually has just as much integrity and just as much history by now in terms of the history of every individual act there as classical and folk together.
Oh, for sure. And another thing which Dee Snider is very famous for, apart from just his music, is the fact that, he went into court, not dressed smartly, with regardless the Filthy 15 list with his song Under the Blade by the Senators' Wives, PMRC, with typical Al Gore's wife at the time. And he wrote a letter and he sent it to them. He got it out of his pocket, wearing his jeans and his hair down. And he was saying that, he doesn't drink much, he doesn't do drugs, he's a family man, he's got kids. He's 30 years old or whatever. Yeah. And he was just saying about how he's a normal guy, and this song is not about sadomasochism, it's about a throat operation.
Yeah.
Because the song's called Under the Blade, and, and they thought it was something different. And he was saying, you guys are clueless. In a decade's time, you'll realise the mistake you made, and they were right. And heavy metal ended up being the big winner. Because what ended up coming out of the whole thing was just the sticker, parental advisory.
Yeah.
And they put on a record, and record sales flew because all the kids were like, "I want to buy that album because it's, I'm not meant to buy it, so I'm going to buy it anyway."
Best marketing tactic in heavy metal history.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And another one of the rap songs that was on there was "Animal Fuck Like a Beast" by Wasp. Yeah. Do you know that song?
Oh, believe me, I know that song.
And it's great. And the thing is, Wasp actually refused to play it these days.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, Blackie Lawless is now, newborn Christian?
Well, born again, but yeah, I wouldn't say that. But basically, as a born again Christian myself, there are certain things that we do take into consideration. One of the things that, I definitely try not to do is, set too much of a bad example about, around my nephews and my nieces, because obviously you want to be a good example to them. But, hey, old habits do die hard. Life is a learning curve. I am nowhere near as short-tempered as I used to be. And I had a lot that bullied me into that mode of, reacting that way to people. But, I think with being a rock star, it's one of the hardest things about the place. It is one of those things just to try and figure out things, because you've already established an audience, you've already made it very clear about how outspoken you are. I mean, you can be a nice guy and you can swear a little bit. I don't tend to swear that much, even back at my worst peak, but, there is this sort of conscience, which is you want to always be a good example to people on and off the record, and sometimes you forget, not because it's entirely down to life decisions that you make, but you want to try and make sure that you do just as much good artistically as you could do, in terms of just portraying yourself as a day-to-day character. And every Christian accepts we are not perfect. We are everymen. We are essentially, if religion is meant to be a spectrum, Christianity is technically the working class background. We are the typical religion, that is meant to be associated with just idealing men and women are who they are. We're not perfect, and that's just life.
Well said.
Thanks.
Okay, we've got to move on. We're now going to discuss some of the more recent, smaller bands that we've liked over the past 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, basically, there are bands out there. There are like multiple bands out there that you feel we really need to get out there, just as names that we can recommend to people. And this may even get continued on a future episode just as a spare topic, because it's a reoccurring theme that you could always bring back to a podcast, even if it's never a main headliner. But, okay, a few bands that I actually do like. For a start, there's the Temperance Movement, a band which has the former guitarist of Rooster, I can't remember his name, but yeah, they are a very classic bluesy kind of hard rock feel. And the song that I would immediately recommend is Midnight Black, because it really just captures everything it is to be that kind of band in that kind of setting as today, modern day 21st century, and just being that fearless, it's fun. It's a great thing to play in a nightclub, and actually, you can sneak it in there, and people will just find it so rhythmic, they'll just keep going. Yeah.
Exactly. One band that I really like at the moment is We Are Harlot.
Yeah.
They're Danny Warsnob from Asking Alexandria's new band.
Nice.
Now, Asking Alexandria are a band that I never got into until album 3, which was very hair metal kind of oriented. You could tell there was a lot of classic rock feel to it, and then Danny ended up leaving the band to form this band. Because he wanted to get rid of the screaming and go more classic rock singing. And We Are Harlot's debut album is excellent. I think it's really good. Another band, I know they've been around a few years, but 2013 to now is Black Star Riders.
Yeah.
I've said them before. The Winery Dogs, they're a good band as well. Who else? Black Spiders.
Yeah.
They're a band who have 2 records. The first record is my favourite. They're one of the better hard rock and heavy metal, like underground bands who have that Motorhead, Sabbath, kind of feel, Priest as well, the classic rock kind of feel. Now, unfortunately, with a band like Black Spiders, you can't see their audience growing just because it's been done before. And, there are some bands like Airborne. Airborne have been around for about a decade now, and they're awesome. But at the same time, I can't see them getting any bigger just because they have that AC/DC sound.
Yeah.
Now, you know a bit about Airborne. Do you want to...
Yeah. Basically, I actually found out about Airborne in the weirdest way possible from the Yogi Bear movie that came out a few years back. And, it was just their song, actually, Running Wild. It was a fun anthem, and it was like, I need to track this down, because when I see a modern-day movie with a very classic-sounding soundtrack, I need to get in there. And the music video even features Lemmy just there as a cameo appearance.
Well, he's driving the van that they're playing him.
I know, and it's just hilarious because like Running Wild is a very great, just classic sound for a band that are so contemporary in terms of emergence. And I just want to see more bands like that come about. And they're great. They really do have a lot of energy that you don't see even a lot of other bands come out. You hear it in the music, but in terms of on-stage presence, you don't see much to match. You get some people that are just musicians with a great energy for getting all the rhythms out, but you want to see them perform to that intensity.
Well, the guy from Airborne's crazy. He's the one who climbs everything.
Yeah, I know.
He's a complete animal. But Airborne have obviously been around for a while. There is them. Another band I really like, they're called Heck.
Yeah.
They are better known and previously known as Baby Godzilla. They are the one band that you'll go and see at a tiny venue, you'd feel intimidated with being an audience member. And when I say intimidated, I'm not talking about the audience hurting you, or I'm not talking about that kind of intimidation. I'm talking about the band being so crazy that they all perform in the audience and like bash up their equipment in a very kind of frantic-y kind of style, and then they run back on stage and there's a bit of crowd surfing like whilst playing, and it's just a complete what they do is so good. Like musically, are they brilliant? No, they're kind of I don't know really. Like, I think their music's okay, but when you see them live, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's something that is hard to describe. You just need to see it. You either need to be there or look up Heck on the internet, because you've got this guy running out in the audience with his guitar, frantically playing, running around in circles, running back, and then the drum kit brings his cymbals down and starts smashing it against the wall as if he's he's just been dumped or something, or just lost his job.
Yeah.
They've got this, and then they go off stage and they're like, "Hey guys," and you're just like, you expect them to be nutcases who have like, I don't know, taken loads of acid before they go on stage or something.
I know, yeah. And actually, another person that we definitely remember from our childhoods, Drake Bell from Drake and Josh. Yeah, Drake was famous on a sitcom which he played practically himself, fictionalized version, with his best friend Josh Peck. And Drake was the cool guy, always playing his guitar, loves his music. It's basically, they based a random, slightly different character off Drake himself. And he's very influenced by the, classic sort of stuff from the beginning of rock up to where it is, the Beatles, Elvis Costello, everything from the Chuck Berry sort of era going up to a bit further, maybe, 60s, 70s, bit further than that. It's hard to place it, but you can tell he is definitely a young guy who's got, like, the sex appeal to get to people, of our generation. He's also the quintessential cool guy that everyone from our generation knows about just because he is, famous for being on one of the greatest Nick sitcoms of all time. And his music, by extension, they've got to know a thing or two about his music. And the only thing that stopped Drake from emerging so much is, like,
he will forever be known as Drake from Drake and Josh.
Well, it's not even that. No, that is not the thing, actually. The thing that seems to be slowing him down a little bit is he is, unable to do as much as he wants to do just based on a couple of not bad decisions that he's made in his life, but bad circumstances he's run into. Like, he's a little bit in debt thanks to, some small problems with taxes, but don't let that stop you. He is a nice guy in real life. He is, just a guy. Oh, and he snubbed Justin Bieber by actually just preventing him from entering a private party of his. So yeah, best way how you could actually, as a rock fan, prevent a teeny bopper from getting in there. And yeah, it's hilarious. It really is just hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I watched Drake and Josh when I was younger, and it was a great show.
Yeah.
I've never listened to. I know he did the theme song. It's gonna take some time. Yeah, I know that song, but and also, I've never listened to his solo music.
Yeah, you should actually give it a listen. Like, I really recommend it. Like, more than that, he also did the theme song. He at least provided backing vocals and helped to write, Leave It All to Me, which is the theme song for iCarly, which is...
I know that song.
Yeah, exactly. Miranda actually does have some decent pipes herself, but yeah, moving slightly back to where Drake is completely Drake-centric. Well, yeah, Drake, does have all the makings, but one of the things that really slowed him down as of recently was he broke his hand, his wrist actually, when he was on stage, and he had to... There was a bit of a panic, really, if he would get to play guitar again. And that was the one thing that was getting in a lot of people's ways of whether or not he would get back on stage. But, yeah, thankfully he is back there. And he deserves to, I don't know, maybe go and do an opening up for some other band. Because he fits into that vibe, but there are bound to be some young people there that will recognise him. And if there aren't that many in an audience for, say, Elvis Costello and what have you, he'll get the crowd going, but once, the older folk get in there and see how the younger guys there will probably see him and dance about to his stuff, it will, by extension, make him a lot more popular. And thus that would be a big appeal factor. Changing charts as a potential possibility. Another band that I like, Ghost of the Robot. Fronted by a guy called James Masters, who is famous for playing Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. They are very influenced by the grunge era. They are very, very influenced by, a lot of that typical classic hard rock, but, they don't make too many albums, but the albums they have made, because they had a bit of a hiatus break when they were all going off doing separate solo stuff, yeah, it is great. I recommend really giving them a listen, because Ghost of the Robot can, do virtually anything. I'll even post a playlist of my favourite GOR things on there later. So yeah, you'll have a chance to listen to it.
Nice. Yeah, I've yet to listen to them either, Matt.
Yeah, you should, because they are great.
Nice. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a few of the bands. What else? I've got a couple of others. There's another band called Buffalo Summer. They're good. They're a they're kind of like the Black Crows. They've got that kind of vibe, and a British band as well. The Black Crows. Actually, yeah, they are British. They're from Wales, I think. Not Black Crows. Black Crows are American. Yeah. Buffalo Summer, Welsh band. I'm pretty sure.
Nice.
So there's them. There's another band, Jet Black, hard rock band from High Wycombe.
Nice.
Their debut album, Get Your Hands Dirty, was great. They've released 2 records since then, which in my opinion haven't been as good, but they have their moments.
Yeah.
But that debut album, Get Your Hands Dirty, was really good. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
So there was that. I'm trying to think who else, because obviously a lot of my favourite bands are older, but yeah. Oh yeah, me and Matt are thinking about going to see Sabaton and Hailstorm next month in Southampton.
Yeah.
Now, both bands have been around for a long time, so they're not new bands, and both are moderately successful.
Yeah.
But Hailstorm, regardless of having 4 albums worth of pirate material, they still don't run out of lyrics for songs.
Yeah. Indeed. It's just amazing. Hailstorm, they were the band that really broadened my understanding of what metal itself could actually be. And
you could be a pirate band.
Yeah, you could be a pirate band, which means, they're mostly from up in Scotland, but this means that Cornwall's officially got its own brand of music that is very specifically meant to be about them. And what else have you got? Oh yeah, I even found out you can get Nordic metal, Celtic metal, big ups for that. And you name it, metal has become so diverse in recent days. Next, you'll even be getting, they may as well just call it country metal, but you may as well have something called cowboy metal. Yeah, or
Indeed.
highwayman metal.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, in the future, we'll probably talk about a few other bands we're into, but because of time, we're going to go on to the last segment of today, which is something that I gave a brief insight into last night. We're both first years, we're both in halls. I hosted a gig in my kitchen last night, and let's just say I was performing comedy. Matt was an audience member.
Yeah.
It was my former work colleague, Grant Sharkey, plays in people's houses every January. And so I booked him for my Halls Kitchens. Have you ever played in Halls? Nope. So, yeah, as long as there's a big audience, support acts and some food, it'll be a good night. And we basically sold the place out, which is good, even though people got in for free, but you get what I mean. Every chair was full. It was a busy, hot kitchen with some great performances. And
nice, tasty beer.
Absolutely. And Matt, what was your take on the evening?
I would actually rate it for a first attempt, definitely a 5 out of 5 star, because it was just different. It was a nice change from your typical uni atmosphere in halls. And yeah, Grant is a very interesting musician. And yeah, with a name like Grant Sharkey as his birth name, it's incredible.
What do you think of Grant's music?
It's very unique. It is very, very unique, and in every positive sense of the word, it is nothing, that you'll ever see anywhere else. I mean, a guy just with a double bass, playing like that all the way through, and being able to do so much, which you would normally need a band for, and his lyrics too. Yeah, I'm a massive outspoken guy and a poet. I love that sort of stuff. And thankfully my voice is getting better right towards the end of the podcast too. But yeah, basically Grant gets, 5 out of 5 from me just for being such an original presence on stage. And the fact it all happened in uni halls of residence, that makes us pretty much the revolutionary guys.
Yeah, we've had some brilliant feedback from people who attended the night.
Yeah.
And after that, I'm just gutted that he can't play more often. Because I'm lucky, I've seen him play lots of times over the years, but last night it really was like, it just opened my eyes into thinking, wow, I love university. I can get my old work colleague who's really talented to play in my kitchen with a full house and other people. Because, what was it? A friend of mine, Eric Walker, he's a talented singer-songwriter who played ukulele as an opening act, and he did a great job as well.
Yeah.
What do you think of his performance?
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, he did, some interesting renditions of a bunch of songs, including a Biffy song that I actually first heard. Yeah, like, it was great. All the acts that I saw that night, including you, were brilliant.
Yeah, just to make this clear, I did stand-up comedy. I did a bit of singing. I do some impressions, but the reason why I do it is because I enjoy acting, I enjoy singing, and I enjoy doing comedy. So I combine the three because, unfortunately, I can't play a musical instrument. But anyway,
Oh, you don't need to. Your voice is your instrument. You're a throat player.
Yeah, there you have it.
But yeah, basically, Grant was definitely the most original thing I'd seen.
Oh, of course.
You were easily the funniest thing I'd seen in a while, and that includes 3 different stand-up acts that I've seen. Mm-hmm. And
thank you.
As for Eric, he was just like, it was nice and laid back, but I will say this much. Not a criticism for the night in general, but I wish he could have mixed it up a little bit with just a few less dancey tracks.
Oh, right, got you.
Yeah, nothing that he, would have actually needed to, just have any major reason to downplay his stuff with. It's just, you know what I'm like. I like my music real.
All right, yeah, I know what you mean. I'll tell you what, I did actually really enjoy his a cappella song that he did at the end, because with that, the way he used rhythm with his hands to play, because I thought, when a cappella, I was expecting someone to just stand there and sing, but the way he used, you could say percussion with his own body was very cool, and that guy's got a great voice, and the fact that he learned to play ukulele in only 2 months is really inspiring.
I'll say that much. He does have a great voice. I would just say, and ukulele too. I would say also, it's great what he did. I just would have liked, a bit more variety in the tracks, and Biffy was about as diverse as it got, really.
Got you. No, that's fair enough, man. Yeah. And I had a blast. I had a blast performing, I had a blast hosting, and I had a blast hanging out with my friends and watching some 2 really talented people. So, which is good, and I would love Grant to come back and perform for us again sometime, but he's a busy man, and as the semester will go on, we'll get busier with the workload. Yeah. So but anyway, so hopefully, I'm really glad we mentioned that, because as I mentioned before, we can talk about Black Sabbath at Download, and we can talk about Grant Sharkey live in Burma Block D Flat 4040, yada yada yada. We are that podcast. We do want to be more diverse. If there's anything you want us to try and work on or improve on, let us know. If there's any bands you want us to talk about, just ask or tell us in person. We appreciate every listener we get at the moment.
And again, I want to apologise just for the fact that my voice hasn't been all that great, but I had a rough previous night, and it was just trying to get some sleep and then waking up feeling ultra groggy. Yeah, my voice isn't quite what it once was, but it should be over by tomorrow morning, so don't worry. The next episode, you'll have a better sounding Matt there. And I'll even post, as I said, on Twitter, everything that I can for our recommended playlists of different bands that we've discussed in the indie range. Not indie as in the genre, but, lesser known, more obscure bands that deserve more notice.
Exactly, and one thing I actually just remembered a mistake I made on the last podcast.
Tell me.
I mentioned Generator by Foo-Fighters. It's from The Colour and the Shape. It's not. It's from There Is Nothing Left to Lose. And I knew that. It was just me talking really quickly and just mixing 2 albums up. But anyway, I just wanted to let all the die-hard Foos fans who are listening know that I made a slight error between the gap of just 2 years 2 albums, but yeah, stuff like that happens.
The 60 out of the 80 fans that I am aware we currently have.
Yeah.
We love self-deprecating.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. What, do we have 60 or 80 fans?
We have about 80 fans in total, 60 of them, which is, roughly about, I would say, I don't know the percentage, but 75% of the fans, they would be Foo's fans.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Obviously, rest in peace to Glenn Frey and Dale Griffin. Your music will transcend generations of classic rock listeners to come.
Yep. And on the basis of your backgrounds, because we did mention Detroit, one of the topics that we will definitely cover is rock scenes in different cities. And that is anywhere. Birmingham, Detroit, London, Manchester, Liverpool, Cardiff, Seattle, New York,
and as I mentioned
Chicago.
before, next week we'll also have festival lineup so we can discuss Reading, Isle of Wight, whatever Glastonbury has, the rest of Bloodstock, because I didn't go full into detail. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about tours for 2016 and what we've currently got lined up and what people should look out for.
Indeed.
And potentially 2016, another thing. And also, Guns N' Roses chapter is continuing to evolve. There has been news since. Will be unveiled next week. Thank you so much for listening. Mr. DuPont out.
Tanza Mafia-Fedora out.